Assalamu alaikum. Dear students, my name is Abdul Haseeb Khan and I have been teaching in the Department of English, International Islamic University since 2005. I have taught number of courses in my own department as well as in the other departments of the university. And my area of interest particularly is linguistics, and I have taught a number of ELT courses particularly in different departments of the university. So today we are going to discuss reading skills. Reading plays a very important role in the academic development of a student. So our focus particularly here when the students join the university is that they should be made efficient readers, and through that we have got various recommended texts and which are included as the part of their syllabus, and they have to go through different types of activities, or they are involved in different types of activities, in other words, by the teachers. Today we are going to understand what is reading process, and we will look at reading as skills. We will also look at certain phases of reading such as pre-reading, while reading, post-reading, and then we will look at certain types of reading, which is called like loud reading, silent reading, or extensive reading, intensive reading, and certain strategies of reading such as skimming, scanning, predicting, previewing, and inferring. So dear students, first of all we look at reading as a process. It is the process which goes on in our brain particularly, because our brain, if you look at the structure of our brain, or if we look at the structure of our brain, it is divided into two hemispheres, right hemisphere and left hemisphere. This linguistic process, or the process related to the languages, they occur in our left hemisphere, and there are two areas which have been pointed by two neurologists. One is Broca and the other is Wernicke. So these areas are also located in the left hemisphere of our brain, which helps us to understand a language, to comprehend language, and to produce language. Particularly the function of Wernicke's area is to comprehend language, and the function of Broca's area is to produce language. So these two areas are connected with each other with a set of neurons which are in millions. You can say that millions of neurons, they are involved, and our whole process of brain, it starts getting images, written images or the texts, and our brain starts translating them in different sound symbols which are understood or comprehended by particularly the areas as I have already mentioned. And then this whole process of reading starts actually. So students, it is a cognitive process, and through which we decode signs or symbols. Actually, it is important to understand that how our language functions or work. The marks which we read on paper, they are just the signs. For example, you might have noted that the word woman, which is in English, it has got different words in different languages. Like for example, in Hindi it is called istri, in Urdu it is called aurat, and in Persian it is called zan. So all of these words are quite different, but they stand as signs which are interpreted by our brain, or there appears a kind of concept when we listen to these words. Actually, this is important to understand that when we read something, we are involved in decoding these signs. So sign is a kind of immediate representation of a word which appears in our mind, or as a form of concept particularly in our brain. So it has got actually no relationship. A sign has no relationship with its inherent relationship with the concept which appears in our brain when we listen to this sign. Yes, these signs, they have got no inherent relationship with their uh, concepts which appear in our brain when we listen to these signs. So it's a very unique relationship through which we understand language or we interpret language in our brain, and this process goes on and on continuously. There are actually a number of areas which are connected in our brain which are involved in the process of reading particularly and comprehending the texts. There was a very famous linguist, his name was Ferdinand de Saussure. He gave this concept that a sign is actually divided into two. One is called signifier and the other is called signified. So signifier is actually the word or the mark which appears in the text, and signified is something which is the concept which appears in our brain. So there is a arbitrary or artificial relationship which exists between the words and concepts. And as I have already given the example of the word woman, so it has got different words and different phonological, you can say, sounds associated with these words in different languages. And this is how we read, or we read something, read as a text, and we go on translating these printed words or signs into the sounds. So our mind understands them particularly in sounds, and that is why we can say that humans are, when they start acquiring skill, they acquire listening skill and the speaking skill first, and later on when they start going to the college or school, they are familiarized with the reading texts, and they are involved in different types of activities where they pronounce these texts within the classroom. So reading is an interaction between words and knowledge outside the text. Actually, when we start reading, we start thinking about the concepts which we have already gained, or with which the world outside with which we are quite familiar, and it is something that we try to correlate that knowledge with the reading material which is on the text in orthographic form, available in orthographic form. So we read the text and we start interpreting the text with the help of the knowledge which we have already got in the form of our schematic patterns which are stored in our brain, and on the basis of which we can read easily and we can comprehend the material easily. So this process actually is purely a process which is in which your brain, and particularly the left hemisphere of our brain, is involved. This is very important to understand, because normally when you ask the students that how do we read, or which speech organs or which organs of our body are involved in reading, so they say, or they give the answers like, some of them they say that we read through mouth, we read through tongue, we read through the voice box which we have got in our mouth, and we read through eyes particularly. So this is a kind of misconception actually, that basically this is our brain which is involved in the whole process of reading or learning language. And as I told you, that it is Broca's area and Wernicke's area particularly which are famous because of the language production and language comprehension. So this was the process of reading. Then we move towards pre-reading. There are different phases, actually 3 prominent phases in the process of reading. One is called pre-reading, and the other is called while reading, and the last one is called post-reading. Now in pre-reading phase, one constantly thinks that about the material which he is going to read. For example, as when the students join the university or universities, they are given different types of texts. They are familiarized with different types of research papers, because universities are always knowledge producing bodies. So the students have to read extensively, particularly in the university, extensively as well as intensively. So they come across a number of texts. It should be clear, particularly in the mind of an individual, what for example text he is going to read. If he is going to read an article, then he would read it in a different way, or he would try to understand some facts related or mentioned in the article in different way, right? If he is reading a book, or if he is reading for example for the assignment which is sometime given to the students by the teachers, and they have to develop that assignment or project particularly which is assigned to them by the teachers, then they read it in a different way. So they must be clear first of all that what material they are going to read and study. Then there comes another stage or phase of reading which is called while reading or during reading. Now this while reading and during reading is the process or the phase in which our mind is continuously active, or different, you can say, areas of our mind are continuously active to interpret the texts and comprehend knowledge particularly. And this process goes on and on continuously. So we were discussing about the while reading process. So while reading process or phase in which our mind is continuously active in interpreting the texts or the marks which we read. And during that, it is important for us that we should correlate the knowledge which we have already stored in our mind because of our worldly interaction and with different kinds of interaction, maybe academic or social, and on the basis of that we have to correlate with the text which we read. So this is how this helps us in comprehending the text, particularly the ideas or which are stored in the brain of an individual. When they correlate it with the reading material available to them, they can easily understand those texts and comprehend them in their brain. So this is important phase which is called as while reading, then or during reading process or phase. Then the last one is post reading process or phase, in which the mind of an individual, it becomes active particularly, and it starts you can say it starts critical thinking. So it happens that while during the reading as well as after the reading, this we contemplate or we reflect upon certain ideas which we have acquired after reading the text, and we go on creating or investigating different areas of that knowledge, and we can share that knowledge with our class fellows. That particularly happens in post reading stage, that when we are able to produce knowledge, we can share that knowledge with our class fellows, and at the same time we can share it or we can produce it on the paper, particularly when we are writing the assignment. So that knowledge which we gain through reading the text, that helps us a lot in writing our assignments and research papers later on at a advanced level of our university education. So students, we were talking about the reading skills. Reading, its skill, first of all, it is important to understand what skill is. There can be multiple definitions of skills. For example, one definition may be Like a skill is a learned ability to act with determined results with good execution, often within a given amount of time and energy. It can be referred to as an ability or capacity to acquire knowledge through deliberate or systematic and sustained efforts to carry out the complex activities or functions such as cognitive skills, technical skills, and interpersonal skills. So reading is also a skill, just as we have got or we come across number of skills which we acquire through our persistent effort and struggle. Like we learn swimming can be a skill, and the same way we learn biking or driving a bike, that can also be a skill. So you learn it with the passage of time. It takes a systematic and a kind of sustained effort to smoothly carry out the complex activities particularly. So reading is also just like the other skills, but it is particularly a kind of cognitive skill, as we have already discussed that there is a very close relationship of mind and our cognition with reading. Without mind or without brain, we cannot read properly. And you might have observed that there are certain individuals, they suffer through different sort of speech disorders, and they happen because the area which is stored in our brain, which is called Broca's area, sometimes Broca's area or Wernicke's area, sometimes their connection between these two areas is lost. Sometimes these areas are damages because of the paralysis, and we develop this kind of disorder. So reading is a very interesting activity, and it is a skill which you make master of with the passage of time. So it is a skill which comes at the later stage in our cognitive development. The first two skills with which our brain is tuned particularly is listening skill, which becomes active when a child is in the womb of her mother or his mother. This listening skill becomes active and he starts receiving signals or sounds from the environment in which he is born. He's a continuous listener actually, so that skill becomes active. And at the same time, the skill to produce language, because you might have seen the children, they start producing different babbling sounds or cooing sounds or different types of sounds, particularly initially in the very early stage. And a child, when he is approximately just 3 to 5 years old, he is able to construct different types of complex utterances in a language. So it is said that a child become quite proficient speaker when he acquires the age of 5 years old, when he is 5 years old. So reading is the skill which we learn with a continuous effort. In other words, that the other skills related to language, like listening and speaking, which we acquire earlier, they are not learnt with a conscious effort. They are not acquired with a conscious effort. So reading is the skill which needs a conscious effort on our part to understand or to read the material, and then our brain is involved in the process of interpreting those sounds as sound symbols, those marks as sound symbols in the brain, and our comprehension ability starts. So reading is the skill which we acquire with a kind of persistent effort, and you can say sustained effort to make ourselves proficient, particularly in our academic career. So in conclusion, we can say that effective reading skills are always essential in our academic as well as professional career. They become more important these days because of the advancement in artificial intelligence, phenomenal advanced technology, and increasing cultural diversity and adoption of team-based structures in workplaces. So reading is a very important skill. Now we move to our next topic. Now the students, let's discuss about different types of reading in which we are involved, particularly as the readers. So the first type is related to reading aloud. This reading is familiarized to the students when they start moving to the schools. So they are asked to read the material and loudly in the classroom, so that they improve in their phonics skills, they can improve their pronunciation. So the main purpose of reading aloud is that they acquire a better pronunciation with the help of producing sounds, or they are familiarized with different types of phones, or in other words, phonology of a language, because you know that all languages have got certain sound systems existing in them. So the students are familiarized with the sound systems of their language, and you know they are able to produce or to pronounce the words correctly. This is this happens at a early stage particularly, but this can also happen at a later stage when the students join the university, because you know in university they are given sometime material by the teacher or passages where they involve the students, particularly the teachers involve them to read the passage loudly in the classroom, and the purpose is that to make their pronunciation better. So even at later stage we can also see the possibility of reading aloud. If for example the students are not efficient, you can say, particularly in language, then they can be engaged in these kinds of activities at a higher level or at a later stage even. Then we come towards silent reading. Silent reading is the reading when the students we start silent reading particularly at university level, because at university level we are familiarized with different types of textbooks where we have to improve our reading speed, because we have got a very limited time, particularly in the semester, and we have got a number of texts to read, or articles, or you know different other material which is provided to them off and on by different teachers. So they have to read you know different texts, and they have to be silent reader, because if they are the silent reader, they can definitely improve their proficiency. It definitely improves their habit of self-studying. So habit of self-studying is also developed through silent reading. Then it improves our concentration at the same time, because students can concentrate on the material which they read, and they can constantly contemplate and reflect on the material which they acquire after correlating it with the previous knowledge which they already have in their brains. So after correlating it, they acquire the new knowledge. And this silent reading also saves time. You can accelerate your reading speed. So it is up to the student that he can improve or he can accelerate his reading speed according to the time, because we have got limited time. So it is better to read silently. So in silently, when we read the material silently, we look at the text, you can say we look at the structure of the text, and we read the words in chunks particularly. So it makes us a very proficient reader. Normally it is also recommended that we should read the newspapers, particularly the columns in the newspaper, and keeping in our eye in the center of the text and going downwards and upwards, like not moving our eyes to different sides. So silent reading also promotes our critical thinking. So critical thinking, like particularly it refers to that when we read something, we contemplate on it, or we try to analyze the material through different, you can say, perspectives. and our start of critical, the critical thinking stage particularly starts at an advanced level, and it happens through the silent reading, and it also improves our comprehension. So definitely when you comprehend something, only then you can contemplate or reflect on that material, or develop, you can sometime create new material. So this skill is very, very important, especially for the college or university going students, and they should master themselves, particularly in silent reading. It is said that if we vocalize the material while reading, which is in fact, it hampers our reading speed. So it promotes our critical thinking, reading skills, and we can improve our comprehension through silent reading strategies, applying the silent reading strategy. And we can also improve our inferring ability. Inferring ability refers to that when we read some word, for example, with which we are not familiar, so we can understand in the context, because there is a very famous quote that a word is known by the company it keeps. So when you look at the other words around it with which you are familiar, you can understand even that word with which you are not familiar. So this is called inferring ability, and we develop our inferring ability through silent reading. Then it is also called the reading in the context. Like particularly you might have listened to your teachers, particularly they often say that try to understand something or in the context. So when context means like the sentences which come before the particular sentence which you want to comprehend, and that after that particular sentence. So you can within the text, when you read that sentence and you correlate it with its previous sentences and the coming sentences, then you can easily understand that sentence, and this is called reading in context. Another type of reading is called extensive reading. Now extensive reading is particularly it's also called reading for fun and enjoyment, or if you have got enough spare time, you go through different texts related to your interests, and when you read the texts at your own pace, that can be called as extensive reading. So you can read particularly these texts silently, right? And it is also called reading for pleasure. So when do you read for pleasure? It is obviously it shows that we have got enough time, and we can read for our own improvement, or for our own knowledge, and for our own interest particularly. So that kind of reading can be called as extensive reading. Sometimes the students are interested in reading novels, so they take interest in reading fictional stories, tales, and sometimes they read the anecdotes or different types of texts in which they feel enjoyment. It varies, that your interest as it varies from individual to individual. So you can read different types of texts, but all of them, they are related to your interest, and they give you some sort of pleasure, and at the same time you improve your knowledge also. Normally it is said that reading novels, magazines, newspapers and comics are the part of this extensive reading, but there is no limit. There is no limit particularly in extensive reading. So you can read the material in accordance with your you can say your mindset, or the areas in which you are interested. You can be, for example, you can read the science or physics, or you can get the knowledge of physics through reading different latest articles, or you can get the knowledge of the cosmos or planets or planetary system or the black holes. It is up to you. So you can read different material if you want to read it for the purpose of fun, pleasure, enjoyment. That would be called as extensive reading. So it also builds your confidence, and it improves your general knowledge as well. Then we come towards intensive reading. Intensive reading is actually the reading which occurs in the classroom. So it is also called as a classroom reading because in the classroom the students are familiarized with different types of texts, particularly in language oriented environment. They are familiarized with different types of texts and they can read these texts, and they have to read it particularly from the point of view of examination. So it is called a detailed reading, where extensive reading can be called a non-detailed reading. Intensive reading can be called as a detailed reading. So you study the whole text in detail. You familiarize yourself with the structures which are used in the text, and there are different activities which are based on that text which you have to answer. Sometimes there are questions and answers given, questions particularly given at the end of the text which you have to answer after reading that material or the passage, or sometimes there are fill in the blanks which you have to complete after going through that particular passage, or sometimes you are supposed to write the summary of the text. Sometimes you are supposed to encircle the correct options. So different options or MCQs are given. So this kind of reading is called intensive reading. So in intensive reading you read different texts which are recommended in your specific course. So you have to read them in detail, you have to comprehend them in detail, and so that you may produce the similar kind of knowledge which is expected at the end of your exam. So you have to appear in exams and you have to appear, you especially do this reading to acquire good grades. This kind of reading is called intensive reading. So it is the reading in which we read the text carefully. We look at the semantics, particularly the meanings which are associated with different words, and we are also familiarized with different types of structures. And sometimes the strategies or the exercises are based on the meanings. So that is called actually semantic detail or linguistic detail, with which we are familiarized when we read certain text in the classroom. So it is also called a thorough and a careful reading, which we do particularly in the classroom, and our main aim is to acquire good grades in our exams. Dear students, now we are going to discuss reading strategies such as skimming and scanning. Both are they are called as techniques or strategies, and they can be employed particularly by good readers or flexible readers to comprehend the main idea sometime, or sometime to get the particular or specific information. So skimming, as it is evident from the very word skim. You might have heard this phrase as skimmed milk. So skimmed milk refers to the kind of milk in which the cream of the milk is extracted or removed, and this is how it happens in the text, that when you try to get the central idea or the main idea of the text, you skim through it. So particularly skimming is a very important technique which you can employ as a good reader or as a flexible reader to get the information. So in this particularly technique, the reader remains silent. Perhaps in both the techniques the reader remains silent, and he goes through the text quickly to get the main idea. So it's a silent reading in which you particularly a reader is involved to read a text and to get the main information. He quickly goes through the text. For example, sometimes the teacher gives you project to consult different books. You have to visit the library, and you go through the books swiftly or speedily to see whether the book is relevant to your topic or not. In that particularly, you can pick up the book and you can read the title of the book, you can read the contents, you can read the preface, you can read the information given at the back of the book sometime. So all this information, and going through the passages quickly, you can easily sort out whether the book is relevant to your material or not. So this technique can very effectively employed by a good reader to have the central idea related to a text or the information which he is reading actually. Then in the same way, scanning is particularly another type of technique which can be employed or used when you are going to get a specific information. So when you are doing, for example, when you are reading in the classroom, or when you are reading for a academic purposes particularly, you can employ this skill. And in scanning, the main idea behind scanning is that you get the specific information which is required. For example, it happens that the students are exposed with different types of reading texts or passages, and at the end of the passages you have got different questions. Sometimes you have to answer the questions, sometimes there are true and false information, so you have to take the correct information, or sometimes you have to encircle the specific information which is required after reading the passage. So you can employ this skill or this technique particularly very effectively. And in scanning, such as sometimes you have to consult the dictionaries. There are dictionaries of various various subjects, like as I'm the professor of linguistics, so we have got dictionary of sociolinguistics, in which the key terms related to sociolinguistics are given in alphabetic order. So you can go to a specific, for example, term, and you can point out easily. So this technique can be used when you are looking for the specific information. So you can employ this technique particularly to consult dictionaries, or to get specific information which is given in the text, or sometime you can use it especially for academic purposes in the passages. As students are exposed to different types of reading passages, and they have to read the passage and then they have to answer the questions given at the end of the passage. So you can employ this technique very effectively. The main idea behind is that you look for the particular information or the specific ideas which you are required to grasp in the text, and you have to answer the particular questions, for example. So this kind of reading is also silent, just like skimming, and the reader can accelerate his reading speed at the same time, and he can quickly go through the text, because sometime in the questions you have to answer the questions, and you have got a very limited amount of time in the exam. So you have to quickly go through it, and you have to locate the specific information. For example, sometimes the years are also given in the text, so you can go and point out a specific year in which a particular event or incident happened. So this kind of reading is called scanning, and it is sometime it happens that the teachers give you certain assignments or the projects or presentation. So in order to because you are given certain topics in the presentation, so you consult the books and you locate the particular information. You can, if you read the contents of the books, you can locate whether the information which is required to you related to that topic is available in the text or not. So you can easily go to the very specific topics or information which you can look for in a text, and you can easily make it the part of your assignment or the project or presentation. So both of these techniques are important techniques which can be used by fluent readers or good readers or flexible readers, and they can use these techniques according to their convenience, and particularly according to the purpose for which they are reading a particular material.